Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk, here in the southeast part of Scotland, capital of the UK, capital of the world, capital of the solar system, capital of literally everything that is in all 5 dimensions. I hope everybody has had a good week so far. Apologies for the small delay in getting started. I was having issues with my Studio Live mixer, which I have now fixed. Turns out the Ethernet cable was loose. So that is now resolved. And that's what I was basically trying to sort out before we start. But that is now fixed. So everything is working as it should be, and hopefully it will continue to stay working as it should be. Fun fact, and anyone that has a Studio Live mixer or a fader port ought to know this, but if you have Studio One running and your fader port or your mixer loses connection with Studio One will freeze and you have to shut it down and restart it. But before you restart it, make sure your device is reconnected first, then restart Studio One and everything will be fine. That's what I was doing just before we started. So, but everything is as it should be now. It was an easy fix, thankfully. So we have a new person here today, which is awesome. And that person is Trevor Morris. Welcome to the channel, my friend, and welcome to Songwriting Simplified. I hope you find this really, really useful. The folks that are regulars here will fill you in on how the show works and kind of the things that we talk about and the things that we do on this channel, which you are welcome very much to be a part of and participate in. Not least of which are songwriting contests that I run. The last couple of years, I have done 2 songwriting competitions each year. And that's what we're going to be doing this year, but I'm hopefully going to be setting up a 3rd one so that we have 3 in this year. And the good news is for most of the songwriting challenges that we do, there are prizes to be won. So that's exciting. This 3rd one, I'm not confirming yet whether there's going to be a prize attached to that one, but certainly the regular ones, which are the Halloween and Christmas challenges, there will be songwriting challenges and there will be prizes at those points in the year. But yes, I am planning on a 3rd one, which could well be around about the Easter time, and I'm still working out how that's going to work, and also whether we can do a prize for that or not. There may not be a prize for that. It may just be, bragging rights. But bragging rights, to be honest, are, I would say, just as important. I would say actually even more important. The fact that you've got your music out there to the public and people are hearing your music, even if it is just this community that are hearing your music. And able to give you feedback, and you're able to take that feedback forward. That is more valuable than any prize, in my opinion. Prizes are great, but they're not the be-all and end-all. And, I don't want my contests to become just about the prizes alone. If that starts to happen, then maybe I might have to reconsider the whole prize thing altogether. Because the whole point of the songwriting contests is that you are able to publish a piece of work. A song of your own or an arrangement of an existing song, depending upon the challenge that we are doing, that you do, or a remix or something like that. So that's the point of it. The point of it is participation, not the winning of the prize. Okay? Just want to make that clear as we start this year, and that rhymed. That's what the contests are for. They are to give you all an opportunity to get your music into this community, and for this community to be able to provide you with some good, wholesome, helpful, encouraging, and uplifting and upbuilding, confidence boosting feedback. Okay, so that's what this is about. The prizes really are just a sideshow, really. They're just an incentive. But my hope is that the feedback that you get from everybody in this community is worth entering enough. So that's kind of very important to me to get out there. All right, so other than Trevor, who is here for the first time, welcome. Let's go see who else is here. And Billy, of course, was first in the door, followed by Keyman. Hello, Keyman. Good to see you. And Dwayne. And we've got Tony Stringer. And we got Kyle Trajuziak, of course. And we got Dave, who is now going by the name of Aurora's Boring Alice. And we got Don Oliver. We got CHDB Music here as well. We got Brett Marler. We've got Don Oliver. We've got Keith over at Radio Tuck Frumpet. And the aforementioned Trevor Morris, who says he's a wannabe songwriter, but he's stuck. Well, being stuck, you know what? You are in the best place you could possibly be to be stuck with songwriting, because that is what we do here. We equip you to get better at songwriting and to break through things like writing block and stuff like that. Who else do we have here? Bobby Booth is here, so we can actually start now. Which is great. Now, the reason why I say that is because Bobby Booth has been in attendance at pretty much, I would say, every show, every live stream that I have ever done. And we're going back to probably, I don't know, 2017, I think. I think that's when I started doing live streams. I'm going to have to go back through my library to find out. Kyle is the man on the spot who could probably tell me what show number we are on for Songwriting Simplified. Or at least Songwriting Simplified since I've been hosting it. It's going to be impossible to say what in total since we started it, because this originally was a joint show that I started with Jonny Gibe. And he hosted it on his channel for a very long time. Until I moved to a new house back in 2018, and my internet was so much better that it was just as easy for me to host as it was for him to host. And so we kind of he would host it some weeks, I would host it some weeks, and we did it like that for a few years. And then Johnny's life just got a little bit too busy, and so I have been running it by myself for the last 2 or 3 years. And I don't mind running it by myself. I really don't. I miss having somebody to bounce off. So in 2025, we're going to have some more guests. We had a couple of guests in 2024. I didn't really have as much success with getting guests as I had hoped, but that is going to be addressed, and I'm going to get some more guests. Hopefully, I will be able to get Joe Gilder back on the show. We had him on here last year. We've had Rich Cresswell a few times on this show, which has been fantastic to get his insights as somebody that composes music for TV, for film, and for games. I think most particularly his work that he does for video games. So it's been very insightful to talk to him about using orchestral libraries and that kind of stuff, and get his insights there, because that's kind of what he does. That's where his expertise is. I'm a little bit more old school. I write arrangements in notation software called Notion, which is also made by Presonus. And I give those charts to real musicians and I record them, and that's how I get most of my compositional work out there. There are a couple of exceptions, like the pieces I've done for the songwriting challenges. Everything has been done inside Studio One. But yes, for the most part, I give charts out to real musicians and record them. So there will be more guests this year. Hopefully Joe Gilder will be back. But I also want to talk to Gregor as well and see if I can get... Hang on, my chair is stuck. Hang on. I have this, one of those plastic mats that goes on top of your carpet to keep the wheels of your chair from not sinking into the carpet. And unfortunately, it got stuck under one of the wheels. So that's what that was all about. So yes, so I'm hoping to get Gregor on here as well to talk about EDM and electronic music and dance music and that kind of thing, because that's his bag. And I know that some of the folks in this audience, that's their bag as well. So I want to get his insights on making music in those styles as well. So I'm going to talk to him and see if I can get him on here as a guest as well. And then there's a few other people that I'm going to try and get on here as well. Just because I think it would be awesome. Paul Morgan is here. Awesome. He has just walked in the door. Let's see. So, Trevor, I hope that this is really, really valuable to you. Keith says, play Gregor in chess. I have played Gregor at chess many, many times. And I am on a very lengthy losing streak that goes back about 4 years. Yes, during the lockdowns, I played Gregor at chess, and I lost every single time. But you know what? I didn't care. I didn't care that I was getting hammered at chess every time because I was having such fun with Gregor. He is absolutely hilarious. Kyle has the show number. We are on number 84 since I took over Songwriting Simplified. That's awesome. King's Indian Defense version 3. Yeah, I don't think I've ever played that. There are defensive maneuvers I play, but this is not a chess channel. I'm not going to get into how I play chess. Because yes, I know all the rules. I know how all the pieces should move. But other than that, I like to do the unexpected because I have always had this thing where if I do something unexpected, I could win. However, unfortunately for me, Gregor has so far been able to anticipate all of my unexpected moves because he is at a much higher level of experience and ability at chess. So, Peter Brick says, what time does your show start? It always starts at 6 p.m. Central Time. So, that is your reference. Central Time, USA, 6 p.m. It always starts at that time, regardless of whether it is daylight saving time or standard time. That's when it starts. Okay? I adjust myself according to your time zone. Okay? So when you switch between standard time and daylight savings time, I adjust my show. All right? So there's 2 points in the year when my show goes back an hour and it starts an hour earlier. But that's it. Other than that, it is always, and so therefore, it is always, regardless of daylight saving time or standard time, it is always 6 p.m. So if you are in the UK, my show goes back to 11 p.m. twice a year. And at all other times, it is midnight. Yes, I like to stay up late at night to serve you guys. That's what I'm about. So, if you have songwriting questions, get them in the chat. We are 21 minutes into the show, and so therefore we have about 40 minutes left, and I would like to take as many questions as I can. Trevor, you said that you are stuck, so please do give us like a couple of things that maybe you are stuck with, and we can talk. So, for the benefit of new people like Trevor that may be watching, that may even not be subscribed yet. And by the way, if you want to say hello in the chat, please hit that subscribe button. Give it 2 minutes, and then the chat will be open. At the moment, it is in subscriber mode. I keep it that way for one very simple reason only, and that is it prevents people from coming and trying to spam my shows with all sorts of stupid stuff. And we had a bit of an issue with that a couple of years ago, and I was just like, you know what? Subscriber mode only, and that's the way it stays. So that is the way it stays. It stays in subscriber mode only now. So in order to be involved in the chat and ask a question, you need to subscribe, please. So please do that, and please hit that notification bell as well and select all notifications, because 2025, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming. Not just more of these shows. By the way, I do 2 shows every week. I do this one on a Wednesday, and I do a Sunday night live show at the same time on a Sunday. And it's just called Sunday Night Live because I couldn't think of anything better to call it than Sunday Night Live. And the difference between the 2 shows, this one is all about songwriting, composing, arranging, and music theory and stuff related to that. Sunday Night Live is all about using Studio One, which is the DAW of choice around here. Because this channel is in partnership with Presonus. So that's what we do. We do Presonus stuff here. And yes, I am wearing my Fender t-shirt, mostly because it was the only clean t-shirt I could find today. So yeah, get your questions in the chat, folks. So Trevor says, at the moment, I am physically stuck, recovering from back surgery. Okay, that's a tough position to be in, a difficult situation to be in. I wish you Godspeed and a speedy recovery from your back surgery. I hope you are not in too much pain, and if you are, I hope that this community is able to soothe you as best we possibly can. But in the meantime, please do tell us a little bit about the kind of music that you work with. What style of music are you in? Do you write for electronic instruments, virtual instruments? Or are you primarily, kind of in a rock, pop, kind of regular band, audio kind of mode of work? To kind of give my own answer to my own question to help you, I work primarily in jazz and folk and funk and those kind of things. It's acoustic music that I specialize in. That's what I deal with. Although I do use some synthesizers and I do use some virtual instruments, but mainly those are to just provide different tone colors. So I mix acoustic sounds with electronic sounds with virtual instruments to create my sound, and my sound is mostly in the jazz vein, whether that be kind of big band or funk or fusion, or that kind of stuff. That's the kind of thing that I do. I'm a piano player, vocalist. I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I play drums, bass, piano, guitar, trumpet, flugelhorn, alto saxophone, a little bit alto saxophone. My alto sax playing is not great. It's still, I can make all the notes. No problem. The tone has a little bit to be desired, but I am working on that. Tone is actually quite hard to get on a saxophone, to get that working well. So I am working on my tone, and I've switched up, not that long ago, I switched up my reeds to a different brand to see if I could get myself there a little bit quicker. So that's my background, Trevor. So I'd be interested to hear kind of where you're at and what your what kind of music you're working in and how best we can help. And speaking of that, he says, perhaps you guys can help me figure out what I do. I like blues and rock and any jazz with a simple melody, and I would like to write rock and blues. Okay, that's cool. Well, that's, that's my background, and I know Brett Marler is also pretty knowledgeable about that kind of stuff as well. And there's other people in this community as well who can certainly help you with that kind of thing. Blues is great. Blues is pretty much the foundation of all popular music, to be honest. You don't have rock music without blues, and you don't have jazz without blues. And you don't have jazz or blues without, music from Africa and African intonation and African tonality. That's all kind of where it comes from. So my background is I have an undergraduate degree in jazz composition. I have a postgraduate degree in jazz composition. And I also have another postgraduate degree in musicology, because I thought that, kind of learning as much as I could about music theory would be really, really important and really, really beneficial. So I have taught from high school all the way up to university postgraduate level students. So I hope that helps with those of you that are not really familiar with what I do, to be, to have a little bit of understanding of my background and some of my credentials, and, kind of how I'm able to do what I do. So you want to write rock and blues. That's kind of broad. And that's okay. Broad is good. Having a broad idea of what you want to do is good. So the first thing I'm going to suggest, and you're probably already doing this, and that is, if blues and jazz are your thing that you want to get into, is do a lot of listening. Do a lot of listening, and listen to a lot of the great jazz musicians across all jazz genres. Start with, something simple. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but start kind of with maybe Louis Armstrong and the Hot 5 and Hot 7 recordings from the late 1920s and into the early 1930s. And then from there, you can kind of progress upwards towards Duke Ellington and Count Basie, and some big band music. And then from there, you can kind of progress into the bebop revolution in the middle 1940s. So people like Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, and early John Coltrane. And then from there, you can start to progress into post-bebop music, which would be the modal music and the hard bop music, the post-bebop music of John Coltrane, and the Giant Steps record, and then records alongside that, like Impressions, where he started to explore modes and that kind of thing. And so when you do a lot of listening like that, you start to get a flavor for the language. And then the next step, really, I would advise, is to start to move into trying to pick out what you hear, either on a guitar or on a keyboard, whichever your main instrument is. Try and pick out some phrases that you hear and try and find them. And then once you've found them, start playing them over and over, and start making them into your own sound. That's how I learned when I was a child, because I grew up in a very, very musical family. My family background is that my parents are professional musicians. My mother and my stepfather are now retired, but my father is still in his 80s. He's not in his 90s yet, good grief. But he's in his 80s, and he is still playing 4 nights a week and teaching saxophone and teaching drums and still playing gigs and still doing recording dates, even at the age that he's at now. But so that's the environment in which I grew up. So I grew up with lots of musicians being around in the house and rehearsing with my parents, and I grew up in recording studios because my parents were in the session musician scene in Manchester and Liverpool. And so I grew up with all of that. So I've been in a lot of recording studios, and I've played on a lot of records when I was a kid. When I was like, this tall, I was playing on records. Sorry, I've got a really itchy nose and it's annoying me. So, from this tall, I was playing on records, and I was playing gigs with my parents, and we went on the road and things like that. So my point here is, as much to kind of introduce myself to you, Trevor, but also to kind of help you get kick-started down that road of making music, writing, your own songs, pop, rock, blues, jazz, that kind of stuff. So I really didn't have very much in the way of friends when I was a kid. My friends were my parents' gigantic record collection and one of their record players. They had many record players, and they put one in my bedroom because I like listening to music, and it was one of the things that kind of settled me at night. So they had a record player in my room, and I just started going through my parents' record collection. They had a very eclectic taste in music, a lot of different styles of music that they enjoyed, but I found myself listening to, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bill Evans, the piano player Bill Evans, Thelonious Monk. I listened to a lot of. I learned how to play piano from listening to Thelonious Monk, and I learned to play bass from listening to people like Ray Brown and Jaco Pastorius and people like that. When I got into my teens, I started getting into more kind of funk and fusion and started listening to the Brecker Brothers and Weather Report and bands like that. I wore out the grooves on my parents' records. And boy, did I get in a lot of trouble when I started wearing the grooves out on my parents', Dizzy Gillespie records or the very, very old Charlie Parker records from, the 1940s. But, I got to the point where I just wanted to learn as much of the language as possible. So I just threw myself into it. Screw having friends. I found I found music, particularly jazz, overwhelming. And so I wanted to throw myself into it. And so I sought to basically just learn as much as I possibly could and listen. And here's the thing that I think is the most important thing that I picked up. Nobody told me to do this. Nobody even suggested it as an idea. I just started doing it. And that was, as I was listening to people like Miles Davis, and I was listening to their improvisations, particularly Miles's improvisations on modal tunes. When he had Coltrane in his band. I started listening to all of that music, and I started singing the solos. And I got to the point where I learned Miles Davis trumpet solos note for note. And I did the same with Coltrane. I did the same with Charlie Parker. To the point where, you could pick a song and you could say, okay, sing me, Bird's solo on these changes. And I could do it. Because I learned them all. And then the next task for me was then starting to sit at the piano and start to sing, to try and find those phrases on the piano. I didn't know what I was playing. I knew I had the language within me from listening, but I didn't really know where to find those notes. It took a while for me to figure that out. And so this is where the music theory thing came in for me, which was, as I started finding these phrases, and started to find the chord tones, I'd be like, okay, this is a G13 chord. Let's get a regular piano on. Here we go. So, this is like a regular G13 chord. And so I was hearing, somebody like Miles play on those, and I heard him play, like he would arpeggiate like an A minor 7 chord. Or an F major 7 chord on that G13 chord. And so I thought, okay, that's interesting. That sounds really nice. Why does that work? And that's how I started getting into music theory. just through exploration. I was just like, okay, this fits when you do this. This fits when you do this. This is much more dissonant, but it still fits. And so I started building up this little library in my head of, really kind of consonantal phrases that are not discordant at all, like that, on that G13 chord. All of that was just an arpeggio, an F major 7 arpeggio. Why does that sound so great? And so it's the fact that you've got the C, which is the 4th of the scale, and you got the A, which is the 9th of the scale, and then you got the 7th and you got the 13th in that. So you got all those kind of tension notes within the chord in that little melody. And then there's the root note. So and that, by the way, is a little John Coltrane phrase that he plays on So What? At this I think it's about let me think. It's about it's towards the end of the first chorus of his solo on So What that he plays that phrase, and he repeats it several times, and then he fills the kind of response with some chromatic passing tones, and then when they go up onto the A flats scale, he plays the same thing again, but on the A flat scale, and it's just that kind of repetition thing. And so that's how I started to learn how the whole jazz thing works. So let's see. Guys, I'm so glad that you are chatting away there to Trevor. This is really, really great. Yeah, Dave says most rock is blues orientated. It most certainly is. It most certainly is. But you wouldn't have rock music without blues or jazz, because they are both progenitors to rock music. Rock music is kind of the love child, so to speak. Brett says, have you written songs that have a connected story arc? If so, how would you ensure that they stay within the same musical theme yet have different identities? Yes, I have. My EP Belonging to Tomorrow was a set of 5 related songs, and they all explored the same theme, and that theme was tension. So I wanted to explore 5 different tense scenarios, stories, where there's either tension between characters in the story or the situation is tense. And so that's what that whole EP is all about. It's all about exploring tension, a tense situation, tension between people and characters and that kind of thing. So yes, there was a connected story arc. I've not done something like a concept record, kind of like Donald Fagen's Kamakiriad, for example, which is his second solo record, which followed on from The Nightfly, which was 1982. Kamakiriad was 1993. But that is actually a set of 8 related songs where there is a clear story and there's a narrator who sets off on a journey in the first song, and then by the time you get to the last song on the record, he's basically arrived at his destination. And so he's then faced with the decision, now that I'm here, do I stay or do I continue and explore beyond this particular place, this particular realm? And so I've not done that. But by the way, that record, it's really, really dry from a music production point of view. There's pretty much no reverb on any of the songs. But it is kind of attempting to be a little bit futuristic. You know, I think Donald said at the start in the liner notes that the songs are set a few years in the future. So he was writing this in 1990 to 1993. Writing and recording it between I think 1989 and 1993, and then released it. But I think he was talking about, kind of like he set this the first few years into the 21st century. So it has a little bit of a futuristic vibe that he was kind of working with. That was his idea. So I think for that reason, that's why the music production on that record is dry. It's bone dry. And I think that's the thing that kind of connects all of those stories, all of those songs together, is the complete lack of reverb on each of the songs, and a lot of parallel compression to get everything really up front and in your face for each of the songs. That's one of the things that unifies the sound of all of those songs. And much of the instrumentation is similar for each of the songs. There's pretty much a horn section on every song, which is to be expected. That's kind of his signature sound. So signature sounds, things that identify your songs as, it's a Brett Maher song. What things would you consider part of your signature sound? So, for Donald Fagen, it's close, tight backing vocal arrangements, tight horn arrangements for the horn section. And those are integral parts to his sound, as well as the harmonic palette that he has, which is quite a sophisticated harmonic palette. And then, of course, there's the lyrical language as well. So even if each of the songs is different on the record, what is it that unites the lyrical language? So you have to think about that if you're going to do a concept album, is not just decide upon the overall sound for the whole record right at the start in pre-production, but you've also got to think about the language that you're going to use in your lyrics throughout all 8 or 10 or 12 or however many songs is going to be on your record. You have to think that way. And there's a lot of kind of inventive metaphors using futuristic concepts that Donald uses in Kamakiriad, which he's talked about a fair bit in interviews. One of the things he said was, this is a genre that he loves science fiction. He's a big fan of science fiction, but he'd never written anything set in the future. So that was his challenge, was to basically create a world, an environment for the narrator, for the central character of all of the songs. So that's one thing you can do if you're a narrative style songwriter, like I am, is create a character that you can basically then put into these 8 or 10 different stories, and see how this character fares. What does he do? Who does he interact with? And you can start to develop his character, and you can start to develop interesting interactions between other people or scenarios that he gets into, trouble he gets into, whatever it might be. And those are the kind of things that can help keep the story arc going across all of the songs, is having a unified character, a single character, or maybe two people, maybe 2 people who are really good friends, or a couple. If you want to make it romantic, have a couple and put them in like different scenarios. How do they get on? And how does those scenarios affect their relationship? How does it affect their characters? So you can have all sorts of fun with that. And then The secret sauce is, having written this whole story arc for all of these songs, the secret sauce then is to distill the whole thing down into as few words as possible. And this is where literary devices such as fractured storytelling can be very, very, very valuable. And, oh, there's a link to, Billy has found a very obscure WordPress link to my EP. That's not the best place to get my EP, Billy, because I think that WordPress place is dead, by the way. But well done on finding it. Good grief. So if you want to listen to my EP, it is freely available. I'm just going to get that link for you. Okay. So let's go copy the link. Let's go back to the live stream without accidentally closing it down like I've done before. And we're going to paste that there. All right, so there is a link to the EP playlist or set list or whatever you call it. What do they call it in SoundCloud? They actually call it a playlist. There you go. And it's 5 songs that explores different tense scenarios, and there's different characters actually populating each one of those songs. The first one, called Chanel, is all about a guy who falls in love with a hooker, and she falls in love with him. It's not just he falls in love with her, which I guess happens in sexual encounters with the prostitute. I wouldn't know. I've never had that. But I'm sure somebody has, where they've, been involved in a sexual encounter with a prostitute and they've kind of fallen for them a bit. But in this case, it's not a relationship of unrequited love where he loves her, but she does not love him. This was a case of he loves her, she loves him. How does he resolve the tension of the fact that when she goes out to work at night, she's having sex with other men? That kind of thing. That was the tension I wanted to tackle in that song, because I thought that was an interesting issue to explore. Not just relationships between a man and a woman, because that's, relationship with men and women can be fairly, standard. I've been married for almost 18 years now. My wife is awesome. My wife is fantastic. Sadly, unfortunately, she's not very well at the moment. So, she is in bed with flu. She's been off work for practically a whole week. This has knocked her for sex. It's knocked her on the floor. So please do, those of you that pray, please do be praying for my wife, and your thoughts and all of that would be appreciated for her, for sure. So yeah, relationships can have their own complications, as they do. But in this case, I thought, what if, he loves her, she loves him, she's a hooker, and they are really, really committed to each other, and actually she wants out of being involved in that, and he wants her to be out of it too, but, for various reasons, it's difficult. So that's what Chanel was all about, and I thought, why not make it a blues, because it's kind of, blues does lend itself to complicated scenarios, complicated situations. There's the blues kind of cliche, woke up this morning with a bashed in head or whatever. And so, blues explores, that whole thing of being downtrodden, beaten down, struggling to make it, and all of that kind of thing. That's what the blues is all about. So that's what I did with that song. It's basically a shuffle blues exploring what happens if a guy is married to a hooker. Not least because I thought, hey, that's a tense kind of scenario to be in. But also I thought it would be hilarious. So that's kind of that song. So, Trevor, I hope that kind of gives you some ideas as to how to move forward. Okay, so you've already got a blues song that you started writing 25 years ago that you want to develop. Okay. But be warned, he says, it's a very simple song. Simple is fine. Simple is good, especially when it comes to blues. The simpler, the better. Don't overcomplicate things like I do when I play a blues. When I play, this is, a standard blues would be, What? I can't bloody play today. So that would be, a reasonably straightforward blues. I'm kind of jazzing it up a little bit, but, I have a tendency to do things like this, So I tend to just chuck in a whole bunch of other chords that nobody ever really actually needs or wants, but that's kind of my style, really. And like Brett says there, if you complicate a blues, you get jazz. Exactly. That's precisely right. And yes, I was a little bit ham-fisted there. I don't know why. I don't normally do that. Play either of those really loud, you get rock / progressive / metal, depending on how complicated and loud. Yes, absolutely. You most certainly do. So yes, so simple is good. Don't overcomplicate things, especially when, you're beginning to flex those muscles. It's like athletics. You don't run a sub 10-second 100 meters the first time you go out running. It's just not going to happen. If you think that's going to happen, it's not. You have to start slow and steady and gradually build your skills, build your technique over time. It's not going to come overnight for anybody. So please do stick around, Trevor. Over the course of this year, make sure you're subscribed. I'm sure you are. Well, you must be because you're in the chat. So make sure you've got that notification bell hit as well. Because we're going to dive more into kind of the technicalities of songwriting over the course of this year. We have done a lot on harmony. We've done a lot on melody. We're going to revisit some of the things that we've done on harmony and melody as we go. Throughout the course of this year, so we will refresh things like how do chords work, what's a minor chord, what's a major chord, what's a dominant chord, how do these things all work, How do we change key? How do we go from one key to another? Stuff like that. Because it's always good to dust off those kind of back to basics things. Especially, even if you've been writing songs for years, it's always good to revisit these things. And if you're brand new and you're basically starting a little bit from scratch, you started something before, you've got a little bit of a blues song on the go, and you kind of want to get back to where you were with songwriting a few years ago, then, now is a good time to kind of revisit. How does melody work? What's the best way to come up with a melody? What's the simplest way to come up with a melody? What's the most economic way of coming up with a melody? What's the most economic way of coming up with a set of chord changes that not just sound good, but, they avoid some of the cliche pitfalls that are out there? Well, the first thing you've got to do is learn what those cliche pitfalls are, because those cliche pitfalls are what we call the rules. So, that's what you got to start with, is the things that do work because they are conventions. I mean, we talk about rules. There's no real rules in music, but there are accepted conventions. Things that we just have explored to death, and we know that these things work. They are effectively established fact. Okay? So when we talk about music theory, we're using the word theory in the same way that scientists use the word theory. Not in the generally accepted interpretation of the word theory, which is maybe this works, maybe this doesn't. No, when we're talking about music theory, it's the same way in which we're talking about the theory of general relativity. These things are established fact because they've been hypothesized, they've been tested, those hypotheses have been verified. We know that those things work, therefore they are established fact. So, when we talk about gravity, things like that, the Earth being round and not flat, all those things are established scientific fact, but we still regard them, we still use the word theory, because, the theory aspect is the scientific method aspect of it. So it's the same way with music. That's what music theory is. It's a bunch of things that we know work. And so those things have become accepted conventions and therefore established fact over time. So we're going to cover those kind of things. But here's the thing. We're not going to do it in a dry way. Or at least I'm going to try not to do it in a dry way, because nobody wants to be lectured in a dry way like you would in a lecture theatre. I've done my stint of lecturing in theatres. I still do it. It's still a regular part of my life, being a lecturer at university level. I still do it. And so the challenge is to make it, make complicated things not dry. So that's what I endeavor to do on this challenge, on this channel even, which is a challenge. But it's a good one. All right, so Billy has given you a link to this whole playlist of songwriting shows. So there are 83 other shows before this one that you can get yourself stuck into. And they go way, way, way back. And you'll see that actually the environment behind me changes a bit over time. Especially with some of those early shows. I hope the shows have got a lot better since we started. But there we go. We are at the end of the show. Keith says, bring up bagpipes and Kenny G, and he will definitely lecture you. You will be standing at the back in the corner facing the wall if you do that. For sure. All right, so that's the end of the show, folks. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Trevor, for subscribing and checking out this show for the first time. I hope you find this show and all the other shows that are to come useful and helpful. And always feel free to ask your questions. If you've got a question about chords, if you've got a question about melody, if you've got a question about scales, if you've got a question about improvisation, if you've got a question about lyrics and rhyming or metaphor, simile, pun, all of those other literary devices, this is the place for those. Okay? This is the place for questions about those. That's what we deal with here. So yes, we are a little bit topic-based, but there's always plenty of space for you to ask questions. And that goes for everybody else that's here, all, 15 or so of you that are here. And we peaked at 20, which was very nice. Thank you very much, everybody. So, yeah, that's what this show is all about. It's a place for you to ask your questions about all of those kind of things. How to get better at being a songwriter and flex those muscles and develop some new skills as well. I'm going to be encouraging you to develop new skills, trying things out that you've never done before. We've done a little bit of that already with the songwriting challenges, like in the Halloween ones where we've had you using a particular obscure mode to write your song in. So stuff like that is what we're going to be doing going forward. All right, so roll up your sleeves, Trevor, get stuck in, enjoy, and never be afraid to ask a question in the chat. It doesn't matter how silly you think it might be, or even how complicated it might be. I've been in the music business for, over 40 years now, and I've been writing songs since I was probably about 10 or 11. That's when I started getting into it. But writing songs to make a living, I've been doing since I was in my 20s, and I'm 50 this year. So that gives you some idea of, kind of how long I've been doing this. And I hope that everything I have to bring here is going to be of value to you. Billy has an after show set up, so if you are up for that and you want to see people face to face and hear their voices and actually talk and not just listening to me, head on over there, and we'll be there on Billy's thing until he gets tired and decides to shut it off. Okay, so head on over there. I will see you all on Sunday, 6 p.m. Central for Sunday Night Live, where we will be talking Studio One once again. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you then. Good night.